We're back with the KMVT City Council Candidates Debate. I'm Seth Shostak. We've been talking about infrastructure, we've been talking about economic issues, we've been talking about business climate here in Mountain View. Let's talk about a social issue here. Treatment of the weird and the less fortunate. There have been several stories recently here in Mountain View dealing with some of its, shall we say, more idiosyncratic residents. Idea Farm, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, Whoa, who likes to promote causes and haul his self-proclaimed doghouse around the city, was recently camped out at the police department, causing what you could describe as a nuisance, perhaps. Elderly resident Loretta Pangrak was forced to leave her home. It was falling in on her. The dwelling was demolished by the city, and the city has put a lien on her property to pay for taking her home away. A homeless man who threw a cup of coffee at a police officer in a Castro Street Starbucks was tased. Don't tase me, bro. Some say that our city employees acted with uncommon restraint. Others say that they're just being the man. So what do you say? Do we have a problem here? And if so, what kind of problem? Or is this just the inevitable business of being in business as a city? Yes, Dan.
Well, actually, I mean, I remember that issue with the gal's home was torn down back in February, and I couldn't actually believe what I was reading. So it's a matter of this gal was declared to be, her home was falling apart. She's, has some leaks, but she's really not presenting a danger to anyone, except herself. It's her own life, and she just kind of wanted to be left alone. And it seems like a lot of meddling, produced her. It got her, essentially arrested and held for an evaluation, and then the city bulldozed her home. I mean, so I just have a hard time understanding how that was good for anyone in that big picture. And as far as the Idea Farm guy, it really sounds like, yes, he's a nuisance, but the city has plenty of nuisances. Are they dangerous, or do they just make you actually think? I mean, Idea Farm, his whole idea was he had a message on his vehicle, and he wants people to think organic and grow and eat fruits and things like that. It's not like a dangerous sort of a dangerous guy, I think so.
Yeah. So you would let these people live their lives?
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to let people lead their lives, but I believe that we are a community where we take responsibility for each other. Ms. Pangrak is not a girl. She's actually an elderly woman who was living in conditions that were hazardous to her. The city was alerted to that, and there was a sense that she could not be allowed to live in a place where the house could fall on her.
Isn't she an adult? Doesn't she get to make her own decisions? I mean, why is that possibly the city's right? I mean, that her own house and her own property, that's not going to fall on somebody else. It's her issue.
Well, we are responsible for each other. The city's responsibility is to ensure the health and safety of the buildings. That's part of our inspection program. The city cannot walk away and say, well, this house is going to fall down on her, but really it's no concern of ours. That's not called live in a community. Obviously, we have very different ideas of what it means to live in a community.
Well, obviously, another alternative would have been, how do we get people to help her out? How do we get people to, help fix her place?
And a lot of effort was put into contacting
Sounds like
her.
they bulldozed her house. I mean, that's not the right move.
Dan, do you know the whole history? Do you know the whole details?
I know what I read in the paper.
So
that's what you know.
The papers, with all due respect to the papers, they do not tell the whole story because they have just so much space, and they give you what they consider the highlights. If you want all the details, you could contact the city and get all the details. A lot of effort was put into resolving this issue as simply and as pleasantly as possible. There was no cooperation towards the city, and the city could not walk away.
But isn't that someone's right to be left alone? I mean, really, that seems pretty fundamental. Leave me alone. Just go away, and I'll deal with this, and it's my problem.
I would like the house. Well, the city has a responsibility.
Where does that say? I mean, what's the responsibility? Are you going to come in if I, have some bad drywall in my house? You're going to come, fix that for me?
I assume if your house is burning and you stand out there and say, I really want it to burn, our fire department will probably have a responsibility to put the fire out.
That's probably a bit of an unrealistic response. I mean, the bigger question is this gal's house was, not presenting a danger to anyone except herself.
Again, she's not a girl. She's an elderly woman.
I'm sorry, this woman.
Okay, well, and wait a minute. Before we make this an endless debate about this particular incident, which of course has been debated before, I'm asking actually somewhat of a bigger question. Whether there's something specific about Mountain View's treatment of people who are, if you will, different than, the Yazzie and Harriet character that you grew up with, or you didn't grow up with, but some of us did. Is there an issue here, or is these just case by case, and you do the best you can, Greg?
Yeah, I'm not terribly familiar with the elderly woman and the house being bulldozed. I just from listening to this, it sounds like something that perhaps the city did overstep its bounds. The city does overstep its bounds, I think, in a lot of situations, especially with these inspection programs. I remember years and years and years ago, they started talking about how we're going to inspect rental units. I've lived in my apartment for 22 years. Not once has there ever been a city inspector in my apartment, nor will there ever be. Not in the time that I'm living there, at least. And that's how I feel about that.
No, is that because you want it that way, or is that because they're not going to do it?
Because I want it that way. Mm-hmm. I choose to live how I choose to live in my apartment. I make sure that between myself and my landlord that it's safe, and that's that. I don't think that the city should have this right to just come in and arbitrarily inspect places. It's your home is your castle. So moving on, the other things. How the police department handled the situation with Idea Farm. Yes, he's a nuisance. Yes, there's a lot of vitriol in his signs and his actions and what he does. But what they're doing is they're feeding it. They're feeding it. It's exactly what he wants them to do. He sat in front of the counter at the police station because he wanted them to arrest him. He wanted them to push them over the edge to where they would do that. So now I understand they're getting bulletproof glass in there, so maybe they'll just leave him next time. But they're really feeding into that. And then they put him in jail for a week. Who's paying for that? We're paying for that. We're all paying for that. Why was he a danger to anybody? I don't think so.
No.
Okay, and I think that's where you really need to draw the line. Was he a danger to someone else? Now, throwing coffee on a cop, I wasn't there, didn't read the report.
Bad idea.
It's a bad idea, definitely. Did it warrant a taser response? Maybe not. I've been in situations where I've seen things escalated to the near use of a taser, the threat of a taser, and I think that there's a kind of a nationwide trend where things tend to be escalating a little bit too quickly in law enforcement. I'd like to see in Mountain View that we're not ever held up as the example of, who didn't have enough training or didn't have enough education for their officers about what is appropriate and when. Okay. Fortunately, we haven't had situations like that in Mountain View yet.
I'm hearing maybe not enough laissez-faire, as it were, when it comes to personal behavior. Council members?
I would say it would be case by case, and these are a few cases that you bring up. I will say with the Ms. Pangrat, the House, I voted against us. Well, I guess the vote that came to us was to charge her for the amount of bulldozing the home. And I actually had a real problem with that because I did think that it was, I understand health safety, how that influences or affects others is our what we have to oversee. And I didn't really understand or feel like there was a huge issue there, but I think there are other options that we could have looked at too. Like perhaps we could have helped her, find or sell her home. Or maybe she would wanted to sell her home the way it was, and she could have, moved on that way. I think we could have had other options for that issue. So yes, there's always, possibilities. These other issues you bring up, the Idea Farm person, I think it's his house that can sometimes be obstructive to traffic, and there is a safety issue there. The coffee, I don't think anyone should be throwing coffee at anyone else. But I'd say our cops are very well trained. I would say they're the best in the area, frankly. We are a standard that other cities try to achieve. And so, they are well trained. They have to, though, go into situations where they have to make these instant judgment calls, and they do their best, and that's all I can say is that they do their best. So.
Okay, but I don't think that there are any constitutional issues here. This is not about infringement of constitutional freedoms.
No,
this is a matter of
safety.
if you don't maintain your car to a certain standard, you can't drive it on the roads either. So there is a certain amount of in locus parentis, that kind of thing, where they can say something. Any further comments on this? Otherwise, I'd like to ask you the following. When asked what your priorities are, each of you were asked this, I think, and it's appeared on websites and so forth, that you, of the viewers, can find easily enough. You've alluded to, and I hate to characterize them this way, but I will, such apple pie and motherhood items as sustainable growth. Well, I don't know, is there any danger of unsustainable growth? I don't know that there really is, but fiscal responsibility, quality of life. But maybe Mountain View, which has a median income, I believe, which is roughly 50% greater than California as a whole, and California is, after all, not the poorest state in the nation, maybe everything here is just pretty much peachy keen. I mean, do we have any real problems? Is there some reason for the electorate to get jazzed by you more than the person sitting next to you, for example? Maybe we want to take that on?
I think I could say that, and my background is in data and numbers and analyzing things. So for me, like looking through the budget and things like that was actually kind of interesting to like, oh wow, that's surprising, and look at that trending and in that way. So I think for me, like I think I would be able to sort of bring kind of an analytical scientific kind of background to the council, and I think that could be really much more applicable than maybe, well, this feels good or this is maybe the right thing to do. So
yeah, that's what would distinguish you, Dan, from these.
I think so.
Yeah. Greg?
I think my most important thing is making sure that whatever we do, I mean, things are pretty peachy keen, but we need to look at things like budget, and we need to look at things so that we can maintain the peachy keen and the status quo to a certain extent, and is to look at it from a perspective of the common resident. Does it make sense for the common resident? Does it make sense for the 72,000 people who live here? And I think not everything does all the time, and I'd like to see it more
Okay,
close.
give me a specific.
Well,
I'm just an example. Doesn't have to be the example. But
no, there's just so many little different things. As far as like, we can go back to. I mean, it's really easy to pick on the Prometheus project. It doesn't make sense to me. There's not enough parking. It didn't make sense to a lot of people in Old Mountain View neighborhood. It made sense to a few. Made sense to a couple key people who voted for it. But from what I hear, it didn't make sense. I wouldn't make that mistake. I think it was a mistake.
All right. The reason why I should be reelected is because I know the city really, really well, and I know it really, really well, not just from having lived here, but from having worked to make positive changes, and to make positive changes in our daily lives. Now, we are extremely fortunate to be living in Mountain View. It's a great place to be living in. So again, it's not that we have blight, it's not that we have terrible crime, but in a good place to live, there are changes that could make it even better. We could have more parks, we could have more pedestrian safety, we could have more services in our neighborhoods, we could have developments that fit into neighborhoods rather than being like something plunked into the neighborhood. And over the past 20 years of being a neighborhood activist and then 4 years of being on council, I have used my skills and my knowledge and my contacts in the community to move the city forward. And I'm very proud of my track record, and I hope the residents know it and will therefore re-elect me.
Okay, well, you're going to get a final statement too. I would say don't go into final statement mode here.
On my final.
I think that the city is a great city. I love this city. I feel like I'm part of Mountain View. I think that Mountain View is part of me. And I've lived here many years. If you like Mountain View the way it is now, I think I probably helped get it this way. I've been involved with the community for many years now, and we've worked really hard to do that. I just want to point out a few things looking forward that, I listen to you, the citizens of Mountain View. I have a proven track record of that, and I will. I can name 5 or 6 issues that I've listened to the citizens of Mountain View more than anything. Here, let me just mention a couple of other things, which is not a final statement, but I really believe that we need a local transit system in Mountain View. I'm going to push hard in the next term to try to get that put through. Many of you don't know it, but we're in the process of trying to develop a 12-acre athletic field and park in North Bayshore. It'll contain many ball fields and be lighted, and it's just going to be a beautiful thing. I'm going to push really hard to get that through. Other things that we are working really hard on are to keep the superb services that we all enjoy in Mountain View. It doesn't just happen automatically. If you call a fireman or a policeman in Mountain View, we have windows of time which they will be at your house by, and they're very short as compared to any other city in the whole Bay Area. We're very proud of that. We think the citizens of Mountain View demand that and want it and want that to continue. Recycling is another important issue. Mountain View has one of the highest recycling of solid waste in the whole area. We're over 75%. I'm going to push through to approach 100%. You'll never approach 100%, but we can probably do better than 90. We're working hard on that. That's important. I think it's important for the environment. I think it's important to be proud of the city of some of the things that we're doing. So that's why you should vote for me, because I'm going to stand for you.
I'm going to shorten your final statement by 5 seconds. Margaret, did you want to say something here?
Yes, well, I'd like to have Vice say as to why folks should vote for me. I think it's really about life experience and involvement, and that's what I've done for pretty much since I was out of school and starting my career. I worked in public service. I did policy work. I've been involved in the community. I think in terms of where I am in my life, I have 2 children who go to our public schools, so I have that understanding of young families or families trying to start out here. I've also taken care of my parents. My father passed away, but my mother lives with us, and so I understand the perspectives of the seniors or the care providers for seniors. And then it's just the relationships that I've been able to build over the many years. I work hard. I think we all do on council, and folks maybe don't understand how much work we do, but it's not just those Tuesday night meetings. There's a lot of prep work, the reading of the packets, meeting with folks who want to talk about the issues, the regional bodies that we sit on. I'm on, as I mentioned, VTA, and sometimes it's like a whole nother city council, but I feel like I've been effective in bringing dollars back to Mountain View, and so it's important to sit on these bodies. And there's also just events and being out in the community and talking to people. I get my ideas from the people I talk to, who are the people out in the public. I also spend a lot of time analyzing data, and I don't think I have to be a computer or tech person to do that. I have I've graduated from Harvard. I have a good degree, and I've studied hard, and I can study information, research information perfectly fine, and I did that this past year in terms of our budget issues that we had. So I think it's that whole package of listening to the community, being involved in the community, and having the skills to be able to make these decisions. And sometimes they're hard ones, and we've done that. We've made hard decisions, and I can continue to do that.
Very quickly, the 3 incumbents, roughly, how many hours a week do you spend on city council business? Not the meetings, obviously, but the prep work and whatever. Just to order them.
30 to 40.
30 to 40.
30 to 40, 50 when I was mayor.
The mayor spends even more time.
So it's a full-time job.
Yes.
Are you guys copacetic with that?
Yeah, fortunately, I work for Google as a software engineer, and our schedules are very flexible. So if I need to take off at 2 o'clock to go meet something and go on site somewhere, that's perfectly fine. I can come back later on and do it, or do it from my own home.
These numbers are not a surprise to you?
No, not at all. I mean, I've heard them before, and it's just like, I'm hoping with my, trusty electronic devices, like to be able to, do the stuff whenever possible, not necessarily have to haul a big packet of information around with me, but be able to utilize electronic versions of things and be able to just better make better use of my time.
Great.
Yeah, 100% aware of the time commitment. I'm ready to take it on.
Okay, you're okay. We have time for one more issue here, maybe. I think maybe you can toke up on this one. By the way, think that everything being peachy keen in Mountain View, and it occurred to me, but maybe not with the coots on the golf course. But, that part isn't so peachy keen. Medical marijuana.
Here we go.
We knew that was coming.
Did you? Did I sort of tip my head on it? Good idea or bad? Should we have it easily available or not? I mean, if State Proposition 19 passes, I don't know whether it'll pass, but if it does, local government would apparently have a free hand here. So, what would you do? What would you do? Anything? I mean,
you're asking 2 questions, though. You ask medical marijuana, and then you bring up Prop 19.
which is
Okay.
which are pretty different,
Well, explain to me
Yes.
the difference, Greg.
largely
because I-
different issue. Well, medical marijuana presumably is limited to the folks that have medicinal marijuana cards as prescribed by a doctor or
Anybody else.
or whoever who claims that they're a care provider, and I don't know the exact criteria.
People on the Santa Monica boardwalk that'll do it for you
Presumably,
for
you
$5.
presumably you need to be a patient needing that for your care and have the card, and the marijuana is distributed through collectives, which are nonprofit organizations. They're not big business. They're not. I mean, that's the presumably that's what all these are that are doing this. And
Right, that's the current situation.
Current, and that's what Mountain View has been looking at, and that's
Right.
what they're hoping to pass an ordinance on to allow. It seems to be the consensus is that everybody was okay with a reasonable ordinance with certain basic restrictions, to allow this to happen in Mountain View. Now, Prop 19, it's a whole other ballgame. Then you're talking about, a state thumbing their nose up to the federal government saying, hey, we want to legalize this, and we want you cities to go ahead and let people sell this, a product that's, there's so many crazy unknowns, and if it passes, it's going to set. I think it's going to set the medical marijuana proponents back, into the dark ages, because
Well, they become somewhat irrelevant.
Exactly, because they become irrelevant. But then at that point, when it becomes a recreational, a legitimized, not necessarily legitimate, but legitimized by the state of California voters as a recreational drug, then that's where you potentially have the real issues of crime, possible crime effects, gang, this and that. Where's this stuff going to come from?
What am I hearing from you, Greg? That assuming Proposition 19 were to pass, because that's the interesting thing, I think, to me, at least. If that were to happen, what would be the city's point of view on this? If you were running the city or part of the people running the city?
It would be a really, really tricky situation to deal with. I think that we, to a certain point, would have to comply with the state law. But at the same time, Prop 19 is there's a lot of unknowns as far as that goes. I wouldn't have a problem supporting the medical dispensary based on the current situation, but Prop 19 it's a big question mark.
A couple of minutes response from maybe some of the incumbents.
Well, I don't know enough about Prop 19. I've heard criticisms of it, and I haven't yet voted, so it's still ahead of me this weekend to try to figure this out. For medical marijuana, I think we've said it should be available to people who have serious medical problems. All the issues around it, of where it's grown, how it's distributed, if it's not for profit, how come people are making so much money on it? There are so many problems surrounding it. We have asked the city attorney to come up with some ordinance, some controls that will make sense, even in terms of where is it distributed. Do we force sick people to go off somewhere where nobody can see them? The principle is wonderful. I voted for it. The implementation is very complicated, and we will see what our city attorney comes back with.
Can I respond to that? So my whole strategy is sort of less meddling for things. I mean, marijuana is less addictive than alcohol. There's no known case of fatalities from marijuana. I mean, why restrict it to being in some seedy district somewhere? It's no different than any other drug that we or any other substance that we restrict, like alcohol. You can buy it at Safeway. You just have to make sure you show your ID. And some people have said no, it needs to be 1,000 feet from a school and stuff like that. And I think that's really an unlikely occurrence. If I was going to be starting a marijuana dispensary, I'd put it right between a McDonald's and a Krispy Kreme. That's the place to go. I mean, know your audience and know your customer. And these people are going to be, it's only adults, who are going to be involved if Prop 19 is passed. So it's still limited to 21. It's no changes to the driving while intoxicated. The same stipulations still apply for people under, the influence of some substance. So I mean, as far as the city's concerned, it's just another business in the city that happens to be selling a product that you have to be an adult or some particular group of people can partake in as a shopper.
Yeah, I think down near Rengstorff and 101, there's a Krispy Kreme and a McDonald's separated by about 100 feet. Doesn't give you a whole lot of room. Alas, we're going to have to stop this rather interesting discussion and move on to some final statements, because we're getting close to the end of this show. And there are always small issues. The marijuana issue may not be a big issue unless Prop 19 passes. I don't know what the chances of that are. There's always the golf course. We could talk about that. That hotel and conference center at North Bay Shore that's always just beyond the horizon, or revamping Rengstorff Park. I'd like to hear from each of you, about 30 seconds, wrap up. We're going to start over with Greg. And what I want to hear is, what's your big issue? What's your vision thing? Why do you want this job? Greg David.
I think my big vision is a lack of a big vision. I don't have a preconceived agenda of things that I necessarily want to see happen. I want to preserve the quality of life in Mountain View. That's a really big blanket statement, I understand, but that's my number one thing. I want to use common sense to make decisions that are based on what the wishes of the residents. And if things come along, you know, and ideas arise that I think would be beneficial for Mountain View. Jack loves to talk about a transit system. I think it'd be a great thing if we could do it, if we could make it sustainable, not just environmentally, but financially, and make it work. Hey, that would be awesome. It'd be nice to be able to move around within Mountain View better than we can right now. Our transit systems are pretty poor. But like I said, basically just being in tune with the residents and just making sure that everything makes sense in the end.
Thank you, Greg. Dan Wilanas?
So I think I've already mentioned things of like having a sustainable budget where we can be much more hands-off of it. I think that would be wonderful. I think sensible growth is something that was addressed, and I mentioned the thing about renters versus owners, as well as things on development on El Camino. And I think a final thing that I didn't really mention was transparency in the government. And you know, the city actually does have a pretty good website. I mean, meetings are open and there's minutes and stuff, but a lot of times it's very challenging to actually find any information on the city's website. What I'd love to see is a place where a resident could go visit, they could see immediately, here's a table, here's a graph, here's how we're doing, here's how we've done over the last 10 years, here's where we're going. You know, that kind of information for each department would really give people some idea of like, you know, what's happening. I think right now it's just too hard to like sift through the information, and we're busy people, but if someone else can kind of make that available for us, then it becomes a lot easier and we become a better informed populace. And I think the other final thing is with respect to the voting records of the city council, like being able to find what information of, you know, how did Dan vote, how did he vote on the last one, how did Ronit vote, or whomever, like to have that information, to see someone's track record kind of gives you a feel for who that council member is. And the final part, along with that vote, would be to have some ability to, you know, maybe someone could annotate their thing and say like, oh, you know, here's why I voted for this.
Okay, gotta cut you off. Jack, quickly.
Yes. I do have a good vision. I have a vision of Mountain View as economically, I'd like sustainable, which I'd like to lead in forging a sustainable Mountain View. But there's three elements to that. You can't take just the economics, you can't take just the environmental or the social. They have to all be in balance with each other. So I have a vision of this for the people of the city of Mountain View where we have it. We're a city with a heart. We care about people, we care about each other, and we've proven that time and time again. You could take any one of these and you could say, that's all I care about is making sure we have plenty of money, or we have the environment, we're not doing anything to the environment, or we're only helping people. You can't do that. This has to be in balance. And so I listen to you, the residents of Mountain View. I work for you, the people of Mountain View. I've proven that, and I will continue to do that. I care about the region and I understand the issues, but I also care more about the people that live in Mountain View than those that want to come and live in Mountain View. And I will listen to you on new issues anywhere in the city that something comes up.
Okay, 30 seconds. Margaret.
Well, I love this community because I think it's the best place to live and work and play and learn, and that's why I want to be on council, is to continue to keep it that way. And I moved here 12 years ago from North San Mateo all the way down because we looked at Mountain View as a well-balanced, progressive, diverse community, and that's how I want to keep this community. I think we need to continue to keep our eye on the budget, frankly. I don't think you can let anything run its course on its own. we have to keep working at it, and that's what I plan to do, is to work hard and do what we've been doing. We have balanced budget, we have top-notch services, we're expanding some of them, and we're also planning for the future with a general plan update and environmental sustainability. So I'd like to see these projects continue forward, complete some of them, and then continue to keep this place the best place that it can be.
Okay, Ronit, the hammer is about to fall. 30 seconds.
So I chose to live in Mountain View about 30 years ago after having lived on 4 different continents. So this was a choice. I chose to live in downtown Mountain View. And that's why I ran for council, because I wanted, as someone who chose to live here, to work to make this the best place it could possibly be. It was wonderful already. I chose to live in it, but I could see things could be even better. And I've worked on that. I'm running for re-election because I want to complete the job that I started 4 years ago. I have the passion, I have the skills, I have the experience to guide Mountain View into the future.
Unfortunately, we don't have the time for any more.
I will say one more thing. I've never refused the meeting. If you have more questions, go on my website, ronitbryan.org, contact me and we'll talk.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. You said you have the choice. These are the candidates. November 2nd, you get to choose 3. I'm Seth Shostak. Thanks very much for joining us here on KMVT for the City Council Candidates Debate.